The US Navy sent a submarine around the entire planet without ever breaking the surface, without refueling or resupply. They did it on purpose because surfacing for a nuclear submarine is the one thing it must never do. Picture a steel giant, 170 meters long, sliding silently beneath the frozen Arctic ice sheet above. No sunlight reaches its hull. No port waits for its return. No radio signal confirms its exact position. For months, this vessel exists in a state closer to deep space than any ocean voyage in human history. Here lies the paradox at the center of modern naval warfare, hidden inside every ballistic missile submarine afloat. The moment this submarine actually breaks the surface, it has failed its mission. Not delayed it, not compromised it. Failed it completely and quite possibly catastrophically. And the real reason isn't fuel at all. It's something far stranger. To understand what keeps these vessels hidden, begin first with their sheer, almost incomprehensible physical presence beneath us. A modern ballistic missile submarine displaces roughly 18,000 tons of steel when fully submerged in operational conditions. Heavier than a World War II heavy cruiser, condensed into a black cylinder longer than an American football field. Inside that hull sits a pressurized water reactor, a compact fission plant capable of running 30 years without refueling. 30 years! The same core powering the vessel leaving the shipyard still runs when its first crew retires. Around that reactor lives a crew of roughly 140 officers and sailors in constant rotation. The crew eats, sleeps, works and stands watch inside a volume smaller than a modest suburban office building. Sealed from the outside world by tempered steel plating and a crushing wall of impenetrable black seawater above. The global fleet of these vessels numbers around 150 boats spread across 6 nuclear powers. Budgets that keep them silent at sea are measured not in millions, not in billions, but in trillions. Subscribe to continue the exploration. Ahead lie more stories of how humanity quietly engineers dominion over the natural world. And yet, for all that power, all that engineering, all that money, the ocean itself becomes their prison. Here is the first contradiction defining the silent service. A nuclear submarine has for practical purposes unlimited energy. Its reactor could drive it under the polar cap for decades. Speed and range are simply not constraints. Power for weapons, computers and life support is effectively infinite. Yet the endurance of these vessels remains sharply limited. Not by the reactor, not by the hull, not by the propellers or the electronics. By food. A boomer patrol carries roughly 90 days of provisions, sometimes stretched to 120 by careful rationing. Every calorie consumed at depth had to be loaded through a single hatch weeks before the patrol departed. When the last frozen pallet is broken open, the countdown to surface begins, regardless of remaining uranium. Then there is the air. Every single breath drawn inside that steel cylinder must be manufactured on board. Oxygen must be generated, carbon dioxide scrubbed, contaminants from batteries, refrigerants and cooking fumes filtered from the atmosphere. The exhalations of 140 human beings must be continuously burned out of the atmosphere. Stop those life support systems for even a few hours and the entire pressurized boat quickly becomes uninhabitable. And above all these constraints hangs the greatest one of all. Surfacing itself risks near-instant detection within seconds. Satellites, patrol aircraft, radar and rival submarines are all tuned to the exact moment a hull breaks the waves. To understand why that detection is so catastrophic, we must rewind all the way back to 1954. That year at Groton, Connecticut, a vessel named USS Nautilus slid into the water. Nothing outwardly revolutionary. But beneath the steel sat a small pressurized water reactor, and that reactor rewrote naval doctrine overnight. For the entire history of underwater warfare, submarines had been essentially surface ships that could hide only briefly. They ran on diesel engines that needed air and batteries that required constant recharging near the surface. A World War II U-boat spent most of its life on the surface, diving only to attack or escape. Nautilus changed the physics entirely. Her reactor consumed no oxygen, it split uranium atoms, releasing controlled heat. That heat boiled water, spun turbines, and turned a propeller, all without a single breath of air. Suddenly, a submarine could remain submerged as long as the crew could tolerate. Depth became a permanent condition. The Cold War amplified that shift into an existential race. Stealth was no longer merely a tactical advantage, it became the entire strategy. Because a hidden submarine carrying nuclear missiles could not be preemptively destroyed, it could not be targeted, tracked, or neutralized. By definition, it became the guarantor of nuclear retaliation. To keep that guarantee alive, engineers had to solve every problem that once forced a boat to the surface. Fresh air was cracked from seawater through electrolysis, splitting water molecules into hydrogen and oxygen using pure electricity. Carbon dioxide was captured by chemical scrubbers borrowed directly from the American manned spaceflight program's life support systems. Amines and molecular sieves stripped the gas from the crew's exhalations, keeping the sealed atmosphere breathable indefinitely. But the naive answer that submarines stay down simply because they finally can misses the real mission entirely. Endurance was never the true goal, invisibility was. This is the second, deeper contradiction most viewers never hear. A ballistic missile submarine is not designed to travel far, it is designed to disappear entirely from view. Its entire purpose rests on a doctrine called second strike, the invisible foundation of nuclear deterrence today. In simple terms, second strike means even if an adversary destroys cities, air bases, and land-based missile silos first, at least one weapon must survive to guarantee retaliation. A credible promise that removes any incentive for attack. If that guarantee is credible, no rational enemy will attempt the first strike at all in any scenario. The submarine becomes in effect a weapon designed to prevent its own use, a paradox of restraint. For that logic to hold, the boat must never, ever be found by any adversary or sensor. A submarine on the surface is a submarine on television. Its position is known, its signature recorded permanently. Its next patrol route can be extrapolated. In a crisis, a surfaced boomer becomes an immediate priority target. It ceases to be a deterrent and becomes a liability. That is why silence, not speed, defines survival. A modern attack submarine chasing prey does not sprint, it creeps. Patient, deliberate, listening for any acoustic betrayal. Its reactor coolant pumps run at the lowest possible setting. Its propeller is contoured to move water quietly, without generating cavitation. The tiny collapsing bubbles that produce a telltale hiss enemy hydrophones can instantly track. Every rotating machine on board is mounted on rubber isolators, then secondary rafts, then tertiary shock mounts, all designed to prevent even the faintest vibration from ever reaching the hull and betraying the submarine's position. And silence, in turn, extracts a brutal price from the human beings sealed inside this hidden steel cylinder. Consider the systems required simply to remain unseen beneath the waves for months without ever betraying position. The hull itself radiates heat because the reactor produces enough power to move 18,000 tons at speed. That thermal plume could, in theory, be detected by infrared sensors watching the ocean surface from high above. So the hull is engineered to bleed that heat slowly, mixing it with surrounding water so nothing surfaces. On the outer skin of many modern boats sits a coating of rubberized anechoic tiles, several centimeters thick. Bonded across the entire hull in a mosaic pattern, their job is to absorb enemy active sonar pings. When a hunting warship transmits a pulse, the sound strikes the tiles and dies inside the rubber matrix. What returns to the enemy sonar operator is almost nothing, a whisper of heat and silence. Even trash becomes a stealth problem. On a surface ship, garbage simply goes over the side without concern. On a nuclear submarine, garbage would betray the vessel's position, its diet, its crew size, its patrol route. So every scrap of waste is compacted, sealed inside weighted steel canisters, then ejected through a specialized tube. The cylinders sink to the seabed at depth and stay there, silent and buried, never rising again. Food scraps are ground and pumped out under controlled conditions, timed to disperse before any acoustic trace forms. Fresh water is distilled from the surrounding sea using reactor waste heat to boil salt water and condense the vapor. A single boat produces tens of thousands of liters a day, far more than 140 sailors need. Showers are available, laundry runs continuously, and dehydration is never a concern inside this hidden underwater world. In this one narrow sense, life aboard the submarine is more comfortable than on many surface vessels above. But there are no windows, no sunrise, no calendar of natural light. Inside, time becomes a purely artificial construct. The human body evolved under a 24-hour cycle of dawn and dusk, now placed inside an engineered rhythm. Historically, many navies restructured the crew's day around an 18-hour cycle, 6 on watch, 6 training, 6 sleeping. That rhythm let 3 rotating watch sections cover the boat continuously, keeping every station manned around the clock. But within days, a sailor's internal body clock drifted out of sync with any surface time zone. Meals arrived when the schedule said so. Dawn was whatever the mess deck clock declared inside the steel hull. Some crews now use 24-hour cycles instead, because the biological toll of shorter rhythms proved severe over long patrols. And one patrol pushed these limits to the very edge of what human endurance can absorb underwater. In 1982, during the Falklands War, HMS Warspite completed 111 consecutive days submerged. 111 days without surfacing, without sunlight, without wind on the face of a single crewman. The boat slipped beneath the Atlantic and simply vanished from the surface world for more than 3 months. Her crew celebrated birthdays in artificial light, tracking the war through fragments pulled from a trailing wire antenna. When she finally surfaced, the sailors reportedly stared at the horizon as if seeing a new planet. Across the Cold War divide, the Soviet Union built the Typhoon class, the largest submarines ever constructed by anyone. Nearly 50,000 tons submerged, longer than a modern cruise ship, designed specifically to hide beneath the polar ice. Each Typhoon carried its own sauna, swimming pool, even an aviary of smallbirds to preserve crew morale. These boats patrolled under solid ice for months, breaking thin sections only to communicate, otherwise invisible beneath frozen ocean. Communication, meanwhile, is one of the strangest engineering compromises in all of modern warfare. Physics itself becomes the enemy. A submerged submarine cannot receive normal radio signals. Seawater absorbs conventional radio waves within just a few meters. So specialized systems use extremely low frequencies, transmitted from shore antenna arrays covering tens of square kilometers of land. These signals penetrate seawater to 100 meters and beyond, but they carry almost no data whatsoever. A single sentence might take 15 minutes to transmit, an entire conversation compressed into a whispered thread of code. For richer traffic, a trailing wire antenna streams behind the boat, floating shallow while the vessel remains deep. And yet the missiles, all the while, remain launch-ready every single second, their inertial guidance systems continuously updated. Targeting packages are refreshed. Firing circuits are quietly tested on rotation, hour after silent hour, day after patient day. A single Ohio-class submarine carries up to 20 ballistic missiles, each armed with multiple independently targetable warheads. In sheer destructive potential, one boat equals the entire arsenal of a mid-sized nuclear nation on its own. At any given moment, several such boats are at sea, dispersed across the world's oceans, each a floating superpower. So why surface at all? Ever? The honest answer? Surfacing happens only when biology itself demands it aboard, when food runs low, when a crew member requires urgent medical evacuation, when rotation brings a fresh team aboard. On most ballistic missile submarines, 2 full crews train for each hull, alternating between sea patrol and shore. When the boat returns to port, crews swap within days and the vessel departs again with fresh sonar eyes. Patrol length, in other words, is limited by human beings, not by the machines that carry them. Feed the crew indefinitely, preserve their sanity indefinitely, the reactor would keep this boat submerged for years. But here's the thing. The deterrence value of the vessel collapses the very instant that it appears anywhere. A submarine surfacing on schedule in a known location is barely a submarine, merely an expensive missile platform. The real reason is uncertainty. The boat's value lies precisely in the doubt it imposes on any adversary. Somewhere, in some patch of ocean covering millions of square kilometers, one of these vessels is silently listening. Nobody outside a very small circle knows where. That uncertainty is worth more than any single warhead deployed. The ocean itself, in this framing, is the true weapon. The vessel is only its silent delivery system, and invisibility is the true payload, not the warheads, but the impossibility of finding them in time. The next generation of these boats may never surface at all. Around the world, navies quietly invest in undersea warfare. Autonomous underwater vehicles, essentially robotic submarines, are already entering service. Some sized like torpedoes for shallow coastal reconnaissance. Others are far larger, capable of long-range patrols carrying sensors, mines, or eventually full offensive weapon payloads. These machines do not need food, they do not need sleep, they do not need light or human company. They can, in principle, remain submerged for months or years, limited only by battery life or onboard power. Artificial intelligence is entering the reactor control room, detecting anomalies faster than any human operator ever could. Algorithms predict maintenance needs before failures occur and manage power distribution with a precision that extends patrol durations. Combined with autonomous navigation, these systems point toward submarines that could, one day, patrol with skeleton crews. The Arctic is changing the map beneath their hulls. Sea ice thins and shifts, opening new polar routes. Old hiding places disappear, new ones emerge. The polar cap becomes a moving, melting strategic variable overhead. The submariners of the coming decade will hunt and hide in an Arctic that no previous generation has known. A new threat is rising to challenge the age of stealth itself. Quantum sensors, still in their early stages. They promise to detect the faintest magnetic disturbances, the subtlest gravitational anomalies, the smallest changes in ambient noise. If matured, these instruments could, in theory, spot a submarine that no conventional sonar would ever find. A hull deep beneath the ice, silent as stone, might one day glow like a lantern to a satellite. The silent war, in other words, is escalating below the ice. Every advance in stealth met by detection. Every quiet propeller answered by a more sensitive hydrophone. Every anechoic tile countered by a sharper active pulse. The submariners keep pushing deeper, quieter, longer, further from the world of light, because the alternative is obsolescence. The deep ocean is becoming the final frontier of great power competition. Not space, not another planet's surface. The dark, cold, high-pressure environment beneath our seas, where sunlight fails within the first 200 meters. At operational depth, the pressure would crush a car flat in an instant. A truly hostile domain. This is where the most valuable weapons of the 21st century will live. Not on runways or silos. Not on the decks of warships, but hidden, silent, waiting, in a volume of water so vast that even the nations that own the boats cannot always find their own vessels beneath the waves. That is why nuclear submarines never actually surface for years. Not because they cannot, nor because reactors demand it. Not because crews are prisoners of engineering, but because appearing would erase everything the vessel was built to preserve. Stealth, uncertainty, deterrence, the uneasy peace these ships have arguably enforced across more than half a century. They stay hidden because being seen is the only way to lose. And somewhere, right now, one is listening. Beneath thousands of meters of black water, its reactor hums softly, its sonar sweeping the silent, freezing deep. Missiles quiet in their tubes, crew moving through an 18-hour day beneath a ceiling of steel and ocean. It will not surface tomorrow, nor next week. When it finally does, months from now, darkness hides it. It slips back into port under cover of night, and another boat, already at sea, continues the watch. If the engineering behind these vessels compelled you, this channel explores where human ingenuity confronts nature's raw limits. From deep-sea drilling platforms to spacecraft built to survive Venus, the coming era of undersea autonomy already waits. Subscribe to continue the exploration. The silent service story is only